tenue par visioconférence est ouverte. L'ordre du jour provisoire de la présente séance est non-prolifération. L'ordre du jour est adopté. Conformément à l'article 37 du règlement intérieur provisoire du Conseil, j'invite le représentant de la République islamique d'Iran à participer à la présente séance. Il en est ainsi décidé. Au nom du Conseil, je souhaite la bienvenue à son Excellence Monsieur Mohamed Javad Zarif, ministre iranien des Affaires étrangères, représenté pour l'instant par son ambassadeur. Conformément à l'article 39 du règlement intérieur provisoire du Conseil, j'invite les intervenants suivants à participer à la présente séance. Madame Rosemary Di Carlo, secrétaire générale adjointe aux affaires politiques et à la consolidation de la paix, son Excellence Monsieur Olof Skog, chef de la délégation de l'Union européenne auprès des Nations unies. Il en est ainsi décidé. Permettez-moi également de souhaiter chaleureusement la bienvenue au secrétaire général, son Excellence M. Antonio Guterres, qui participe à notre visioconférence de ce matin, et de saluer la participation de son Excellence M. Mike Pompeo, secrétaire d'État des États-Unis d'Amérique. Le Conseil de sécurité va maintenant aborder l'examen du point 2 de l'ordre du jour. J'attire l'attention des membres du Conseil sur le rapport du secrétaire général sur l'application de la résolution 2231 du Conseil de sécurité, publiée sous la cote S 2020-531, et sur le rapport de la commission conjointe au Conseil de sécurité sur l'état d'application des décisions du groupe de travail sur l'approvisionnement et les éventuelles difficultés de mise en œuvre, publié sous la cote S 2020-508. À la présente séance, nous entendrons les exposés de Madame Di Carlo, de son Excellence Monsieur Skog et de son Excellence Monsieur Mark Pekstein de Buitswerve, ambassadeur et représentant permanent de la Belgique auprès de l'Organisation des Nations Unies, qui s'exprimera en sa qualité de facilitateur chargé par le Conseil de sécurité de promouvoir l'application de la résolution 2231. Je donne à présent la parole à Madame Rosemary Di Carlo.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, endorsed by Resolution 2231, is a significant achievement of multilateral diplomacy and dialogue. It remains crucial to the global nuclear non-proliferation architecture and to regional and international security. It is therefore regrettable that the future of this agreement is in doubt. The United States withdrew from the agreement in May 2018. Before that date, the International Atomic Energy Agency verified in 11 reports that Iran was complying with its nuclear commitments contained in the plan. As we have said, we regret the U.S. withdrawal from the plan. Reimposition of U.S. national sanctions lifted under the plan, as well as the decision not to extend waivers for the trade in oil with Iran and in all remaining JCPOA originating projects, are contrary to the goals of the JCPOA. These actions have impeded the ability of Iran and other member states to fully implement the plan and the resolution. On 12 March, in a letter to the Secretary General, Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif wrote that U.S. sanctions were constraining his country's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Secretary General has appealed for the waiving of sanctions that could undermine a country's capacity to respond to the pandemic. Further, he has expressed concern that the posture of private sector actors seeking to avert risk may continue to impede legitimate humanitarian aid transactions, especially with regard to banking needs. Mr. President, we also regret the steps Iran has taken since July 2019 in response to the U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA. As a result of these steps, taken under the monitoring of the IAEA, Iran has surpassed JCPOA stipulated limits on uranium enrichment level and on its stockpiles of heavy water and low-enriched uranium. Iran has also lifted JCPOA limitations on its nuclear research and development activities. Today, we appeal again to Iran to return to the full implementation of the plan. We also urge Iran to address concerns raised by other states regarding its actions inconsistent with the restrictive measures in Annex B of the resolution. We encourage JCPOA participants to resolve all differences within the dispute resolution mechanism under the plan. We also urge all member states to avoid provocative rhetoric and actions that may have a further negative impact on the JCPOA and regional stability. The full implementation of the plan is key to securing tangible economic benefit to the Iranian people. We are encouraged by the positive developments in INSTEX, which started to process its first transactions. Mr. President, I will now turn to the Secretary General's 9th report on the implementation of Resolution 2231. As guided by the Security Council, the report focuses on Annex B to the resolution. It also provides findings and recommendations to Council members, as called for in paragraph 7 of the note by the President, 2016/44. First, regarding the nuclear-related provisions, we stress that the procurement channel is a vital transparency and confidence-building mechanism. We call on all member states and the private sector to support and use the procurement channel. Further, we regret the 27 May decision of the United States to terminate the sanctions waivers related to the modernization of the Iraq reactor. Exemptions set out in paragraph 2 of Annex B specifically designed to provide for the transfer of such items, material, equipment, goods, and technology required for the nuclear activities of Iran under the plan. Second, regarding the ballistic missile-related provisions, France, Germany, Iran, Israel, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, and the United States provided information on Iran's launch of Seymour and Kased space launch vehicles in February and April of this year. The information provided reflects divergent views among those member states as to whether those launches are inconsistent with paragraph 3 of Annex B. Paragraph 3 called upon Iran not to undertake any activity related to ballistic missiles designed to be capable of delivering nuclear weapons, including launches using such ballistic missile technology. Third, on the arms-related restrictions, the Secretariat analyzed 2 U.S. seizures of arms and related material and continued its assessment of the cruise missiles and delta-wing UAVs used in the 2019 attacks on Saudi Arabia. Regarding the November 2019 and February 2020 U.S. seizures of arms and related material, the Permanent Mission of the Islamic Republic of Iran informed the Secretariat that, and I quote, "The allegedly seized anti-tank guided missiles and thermal optical weapon sites do not conform to the products manufactured by the Islamic Republic of Iran," end quote. Iran further informed us that similar optical sites claimed to be exported to Iran and later seized in Aden are still in use in different military units. Our findings indicate that the container launch units of the anti-tank guided missiles were of Iranian origin and had post-2016 production dates. We ascertained that the optical weapon sites had been delivered to Iran between February 2016 and April 2018, and observed that the thermal optical weapon sites have design characteristics similar to those also produced by a commercial entity in Iran. We also found that the components associated with the anti-ship missile the unidentified missile, as well as the cruise missile bore Farsi markings. The transfer of such material from Iran after 16 January 2016 may be inconsistent with Resolution 2231. Let me now turn to the cruise missiles and delta-wing UAVs used in the attacks on Saudi Arabia last year. In December 2019, we stated that we had not yet been able to independently corroborate that those weapons and their components were of Iranian origin or transferred from Iran in a manner inconsistent with Resolution 2231. Since then, we have made further progress in our examination of the cruise missiles and delta-wing UAVs used in the attacks. We were able to confirm that some of the components of the delta-wing UAVs, the ignition coils, and the cruise missiles, the pressure sensors of the fuel feed system, had been exported to Iran in 2016 and 2018, respectively. In our analysis, we took note of the feedback from Iran that the concerned pressure transmitter is not a dual-use item to be monitored by the government. We also ascertained that the jet engines and other components of the UAVs and cruise missiles show similarity to known Iranian models or have similar components, that is, the gyroscopes and engines, to an Iranian UAV reportedly recovered in Afghanistan in 2016. Furthermore, the sections of the cruise missiles recovered from the attacks and the sections seized by the United States in November 2019 form part of the same missile system, and it is highly likely that they were produced by the same entity. Finally, some of the items in the two seizures by the United States, a digital air data computer and the model V10 gyroscope, were identical or similar to those found in the debris of the cruise missiles and delta-wing UAVs used in the 2019 attacks on Saudi Arabia. Mr. President, based on these technical findings, while also having taken into account the information provided by Iran, the Secretariat assessed that the examined cruise missiles and delta-wing UAVs and parts thereof used in the attacks on Saudi Arabia were of Iranian origin. Finally, the Secretariat also received information from Australia, Israel, and Saudi Arabia regarding alleged transfers of arms and related material from Iran. We are analyzing these issues, and the Secretary General will report back to the Council, if appropriate, in due course. Mr. President, notwithstanding the current challenges to the JCPOA, it remains the best way to ensure the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. Its full implementation, as well as faithful adherence to Resolution 2231, is also fundamental to regional stability. Let me conclude by acknowledging the leadership of His Excellency, Mr. Mark Petstein de Butzwever, and his role as the facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231, and to assure him, once again, of the Secretariat's full support. I would also like to thank the coordinator of the Procurement Working Group of the Joint Commission for the continued cooperation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie Madame Di Carlo de son exposé. I just want to ask colleagues to check if their mics are closed. Et je vais maintenant donner la parole à Monsieur Mark Petstein de Butzwever en attendant que Monsieur Skog nous rejoigne.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I'm speaking in my capacity as Security Council Facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231. Since having been appointed as facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231 in January 2019 for a 2-year period, it has been an honor for me to serve this Council in the exercise of this mandate. While carrying out this task, I've been able to count on the unwavering support of the Secretariat and thank them for their commitment. According to paragraph 3 of the note by the PSC S 2016/44, The facilitator shall brief the other members of the Council on its work and implementation of the resolution every 6 months in parallel with the report submitted by the Secretary General. The report of the facilitator is aimed to be a factual and objective account through which the Security Council is informed of the activities that took place in the 2231 format, in conjunction with the reports of the Secretary General and the Joint Commission. It is an agreed text that reflects the Council's comments and approval, and when submitted to the President of the Security Council, it is a report that reflects consensus by the Council. Unfortunately, I have to inform you that this 9th report of the facilitator has not been approved by all the members of this Council. Informal consultations with the members concerned were held exhaustively with a view to reaching a consensus, but with no avail. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the members for their written comments and their active contributions. So, in lieu of having no report at this point of time, I would like to brief you on some of the key highlights of the activities of the 2231 format that took place during the 6-month reporting period. That is from 17 December 2019 to 23 June 2020. First, the Security Council in the 2231 format held 2 informal meetings via a closed video teleconference. First, a meeting on 13 May 2020 to discuss the 22 April 2020 space satellite launch by the Islamic Republic of Iran. And then a meeting on 22 June to discuss the findings and recommendations contained in the 9th report of the Secretary General on Resolution 2231 prior to its public release. Second, the 2 regular quarterly reports issued by the International Atomic Energy Agency during the last 6 months, in March and June, were also circulated to the 2231 representatives for their information. Third, I would like to thank member states who sent official communications, either addressed to the President of the Security Council, the Secretary General, and or to myself, which were circulated within the 2231 format during this 6 months period. There was a total of 21 letters from 9 member states circulated. These letters reflect the state of deliberations amongst the parties on the main topics at stake in relation with the implementation of Resolution 2231. I deeply regret that I'm not in a position to present a written overview of this contribution central to our debate. Lastly, I note that there were 4 proposals submitted to the Security Council for approval through the procurement channel during the last 6 months. In conclusion, Mr. President, let me simply join with the other bodies responsible for the implementation of Resolution 2231, the Secretary General, the Joint Commission, and the IAEA, in strongly regretting the deterioration of the current context, which affects compliance with Resolution 2231 and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. I would like to end my briefing by reiterating paragraph 2 of Resolution 2231, which calls upon, and I quote, all member states, regional organizations, and regional organizations and international organizations to take such actions as may be appropriate to support the implementation of JCPOA, including by refraining from actions that undermine implementation of commitments under JCPOA. I thank you.
Je remercie Monsieur Mark Pechstein de Botswerve pour sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole à son Excellence Monsieur Olof Skog. Olof, we don't hear you. Olof, we don't hear you.
Thank you, Nicolas. Merci, le Président. Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm honored to address the Security Council today on behalf of the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Mr. Josep Borrell, in his capacity as coordinator of the Joint Commission established by the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and will therefore focus my intervention today on that. I'd like also to extend my gratitude to Secretary General Antonio Guterres and His Excellency Mark Pechstein de Botswerve for serving as facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231 for the excellent collaboration over the past months. I'd like to convey my sincere gratitude for the work done by the colleagues in the UN Secretariat, including in relation to the procurement channel and the work to prepare the latest report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231. Mr. President, nuclear proliferation remains a global threat with potentially worldwide consequences. That is why we have the responsibility as members of the international community to address these challenges jointly for the benefit of world peace and future generations. Only last week, the international community celebrated the anniversary of the signing of the UN Charter. At that time, 75 years ago, the disastrous damage caused by nuclear weapons was fresh in memory. It's in this light and with this memory in mind that we need to view the JCPOA as a key component of the global non-proliferation architecture that helps reduce regional and global security risks. The JCPOA has removed the prospect of a nuclear-armed Iran from the regional security equation. Most importantly, it has done so in a verifiable way, as the agreement provides for an unprecedented amount of IAEA access and monitoring under Iran's Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement and the additional protocol. Thanks to that additional protocol, the IAEA has access in both declared and undeclared sites in Iran, and in key facilities, the IAEA has installed 24/7 online monitoring systems. According to the IAEA's annual safeguards implementation reports, Iran's regular inspections have doubled compared to the period before the JCPOA. In addition, since 2016, Iran consistently holds the highest number of complementary access under the additional protocol. It's important to remember that the additional protocol is implemented by Iran as part of its JCPOA commitments. Therefore, losing the JCPOA would also mean losing the additional protocol, the access rights granted to the IAEA, and accordingly, the additional transparency. Unfortunately, despite all its achievements, the JCPOA has been increasingly challenged. As coordinator of the Joint Commission, we have spared no efforts to engage with all remaining participants and other partners to find solutions within the framework of the JCPOA and to address current difficulties, including matters referred to the Joint Commission for Resolution. Now more than ever, a joined-up international effort is needed to preserve the agreement, an agreement that was endorsed by the international community through the adoption of the Security Council Resolution 2231. I'd also like to reiterate our deep appreciation for the IAEA, which plays a crucial role in monitoring and verifying the entirety of Iran's nuclear program, including Iran's commitments under the JCPOA. We fully support the impartial and technical work carried out by the IAEA, as well as efforts that facilitate the IAEA in carrying out its mandate. I recognize that Iran continued to fully comply with the nuclear-related provisions for 3.5 years, including for 14 months after the United States withdrew from the JCPOA and reimposed unilateral sanctions, which the EU and its member states, as well as the other remaining participants of the JCPOA, continue to deeply regret. However, it is deeply worrying that Iran has decreased its nuclear-related JCPOA commitments. We remain particularly concerned about Iran's continued accumulation of low-enriched uranium in excess of the JCPOA stockpile and enrichment level thresholds, its continued expansion of R&D, the advanced centrifuge, and the enrichment activities in Fordo. These activities are inconsistent with the nuclear-related provisions of the JCPOA. We urge Iran to reverse these activities and return to full implementation of its commitments without delay. At the last Joint Commission meeting on 26 February, the remaining participants in the JCPOA confirmed their determination to pursue all efforts to preserve the agreement. Full and effective implementation by all sides is key. These efforts have continued over the past months, and we remain determined to continue working with the international community to preserve the JCPOA, an important multilateral achievement endorsed by the Security Council Resolution 2231. Mr. President, I would like to recall that the JCPOA is a non-proliferation agreement. Implementation by Iran of its nuclear-related commitments is one essential part of the agreement. Here, the agreement sets strict limitations regarding Iran's access to both plutonium and high-enriched uranium, and establishes a comprehensive monitoring and verification mechanism. The other essential element is the comprehensive lifting of sanctions, promoting and facilitating the normalization of trade and economic relations with Iran. The European Union, for its part, lifted sanctions in line with its JCPOA obligations on implementation day. Today, it remains fully committed to working on the preservation of the agreement, including towards the objective of normalizing the economic and trade relations with Iran. In this spirit, extensive technical support has been provided to set up and operationalize the instrument in support of trade exchanges, INSTEX. Mr. President, I'd like to address the issue of the possible snapback of sanctions in this Council, about which there has been recent speculation. As the High Representative has already said, in May 2018, the US announced that it was ending its participation in the JCPOA. This announcement was confirmed in a presidential memorandum. Since then, the US has not participated in any meetings or activities within the framework of the agreement. I'll turn now to the procurement channel, which was established under Annex 4 of the JCPOA. The procurement channel remains a unique non-proliferation, transparency, and confidence-building instrument. It is a key mechanism to prevent the misuse of nuclear or dual-use items, to ensure that exports of such items are consistent with the JCPOA. We recognize the challenges brought about by the US withdrawal from the JCPOA and the reimposition of sanctions. The procurement channel, however, remains a UN Security Council mechanism, and the decision on a proposal for transfer is endorsed by all its 15 members. In the 9th Joint Commission report on the status of the procurement working group's decisions and on any implementation issues submitted to the facilitator on 5th June and subsequently circulated as a document of the Security Council, the remaining participants stated their commitment to continue reviewing proposals in an impartial and independent manner. In this context, it is a positive signal that the channel continues to receive proposals. I expect all Security Council members to continue to support the preservation of the channel in line with Resolution 2231. We also deeply regret the US decision to end the 3 waivers covering the JCPOA nuclear projects in Iran, including the modernization project. These projects, endorsed by the Council, Resolution 2231, serve the non-proliferation interests of all and provide the international community with assurances of the exclusively peaceful and safe nature of Iranian nuclear activities. Mr. President, today, as I've said, I'm focusing my intervention on the JCPOA. Nevertheless, I'm very mindful of a series of events outside the nuclear domain which are increasingly worrying. Finally, I should like to recall that the JCPOA will have its 5th anniversary in 2 weeks. The agreement remains an achievement of multilateral diplomacy. Full implementation of the JCPOA by all sides is crucial. It remains the only tool to provide the international community with the necessary assurances regarding Iran's nuclear program. It is, therefore, essential that we do all we can to preserve it. We should not allow it to be derailed or degraded or to become irreparable, nor should we assume that an opportunity will arise again in the future for the international community to address Iran's nuclear program in such a comprehensive manner. I thank you very much.
Je remercie Son Excellence Monsieur Olof Skog pour son exposé. Je donne maintenant la parole aux membres du Conseil de sécurité. Je donne la parole à Son Excellence Monsieur Mike Pompeo, secrétaire d'État des États-Unis d'Amérique. Secretary Pompeo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Nikolai, and thanks for the couple words in English there. I appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you, Secretary General. Rosemary, thank you for your comments this morning. I would like to say you made some comments about humanitarian assistance inside of Iran. The United States has tried to facilitate that in light of the COVID issues inside of Iran. Indeed, we offered our own American assistance to the Iranians, which was rejected by them. So to suggest somehow that our sanctions have prevented humanitarian assistance to get into Iran, I think is a misunderstanding of the situation on the ground. Because of the flawed nuclear deal negotiated by the previous American administration, the arms embargo on the world's most heinous terrorist regime is scheduled to expire on October 18th, a mere 4 months from now. 4 months. This chamber has a choice. Stand for international peace and security, as the United Nations founders intended, or let the arms embargo on the Islamic Republic of Iran expire, betraying the UN's mission and its finest ideals, which we have all pledged to uphold. If you fail to act, Iran will be free to purchase Russian-made fighter jets that can strike up to 3,000-kilometer radius, putting cities like Riyadh, New Delhi, Rome, and Warsaw in Iranian crosshairs. Iran will be free to upgrade and expand its fleet of submarines to further threaten international shipping and freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, and the Arabian Sea. Iran will be free to purchase new and advanced technologies for its proxies and partners throughout the Middle East, including Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Iran will hold a sword of Damocles over the economic stability of the Middle East, endangering nations like Russia and China that rely on stable energy prices. Iran will be free to become a rogue weapons dealer, supplying arms to fuel conflicts from Venezuela to Syria to the far reaches of Afghanistan. In November of last year, President Rouhani himself said, quote, "When the embargo is lifted next year, we can easily buy and sell weapons." End of quote. We should take him at his word. Iran is not a responsible democracy like Australia or India. We already know that Tehran will do, given the ability to buy more weaponry. Just consider the Secretary General's UNSC 2231 report that we're discussing today. The report confirmed that weapons used to attack Saudi Arabia in September 2019 were of Iranian origin. The report has also confirmed the weapons interdicted off the coast of Yemen in November of 2019 and February of 2020 were of Iranian origin. Iran is already violating the arms embargo, even before its expiration date. Imagine if Iranian activity were sanctioned, authorized by this group, if the restrictions are lifted. And we don't need the Secretary General's report to see what else the regime is doing. In January, Iran launched an attack on the coalition forces in Iraq with its own advanced missiles. Iran, even as we sit here today, supplies Shia militia groups like Kataib Hezbollah, groups which have launched dozens of rocket attacks since the fall of last year against U.S. and coalition forces, fighting the important continued campaign against Daesh. Iran unleashes ship mining attacks on commercial vessels in the Gulf of Oman as it did in May and June of last year. Nearly all countries have arms. Mature nations use them for defensive purposes and to promote stability, but not the Islamic Republic of Iran. Don't just take it from me or from the United States. Listen to countries in the region, from Israel to the Gulf. Countries in the Middle East who are most exposed to Iran's predations are speaking with a single voice. Extend the arms embargo. This council has a responsibility to listen to them. The United States' overwhelming preference is to work with this council to extend the arms embargo to protect human life, to protect our national security, and to protect yours. We've imposed arms restrictions on Tehran in various forms for 13 years, and with good reason, and to substantial effect. When we unanimously adopted UN Security Council Resolution 1747 back in 2007, which, among other actions, prohibited arms transfers from Iran, the United Kingdom's representative to the Council said, quote, "The path of proliferation by Iran is not one that the international community can accept," end of quote. Welcome that statement from the United Kingdom, from France and Germany, recently recognizing that lifting the embargo would have major implications for regional security and stability. I also welcome the support of almost 400 members of the United States Congress. For those of you not tracking, there's only 435. Those almost 400 members supported my diplomacy to extend this arms embargo. Our concern is a matter of national security, not partisan politics. We saw from Iran's actions while implementing the JCPOA that the regime doesn't moderate when we lift sanctions or weaken accountability. In fact, it does just the opposite. While still claiming to remain in the deal, Iran, by its own admission, and as confirmed by the IAEA, is showing no signs of slowing its destabilizing nuclear escalation. Iran is also accumulating dangerous knowledge. For example, late last year, Iran announced that its scientists were working on a new centrifuge, the IR-9, that would allow Tehran to enrich uranium up to 50 times faster than the IR-1 centrifuges allowed under the JCPOA. Even as Iran pursues research that could threaten its breakout time to a nuclear weapon, it's also denied IAEA inspections access to locations Iran is obligated to provide. This council cannot simply hope that Iran acts in good faith given its indisputable fact pattern. The council must hold Iran accountable, and we all have the chance to do so. I'll close with this. I'll close with an appeal to our greater purpose. Article 1 of the UN Charter says the purpose of the UN is to take effective collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to peace. Consider the overwhelming evidence that I've detailed today. It's a fraction of the evidence available. If Iran isn't a threat to peace that demands a collective measure, I do not know what is. The Council must reject extortion diplomacy. President Rouhani recently declared, quote, "Iran will give a crushing response if the arms embargo on Tehran is extended," end of quote. Given the Iranian regime's history of resorting to terrorism and violence, perhaps we should take this threat seriously. Iran's foreign minister will speak today. I hope he'll tell us whom he intends to crush and how he will crush them. Renewing the embargo will exert more pressure on Tehran to start behaving like a normal nation. The world needs this to happen. The long-suffering Iranian people need this to happen. 75 years ago, the founders of the UN came together after the devastation of World War II to ensure that the world would never again have to face such horrors. Let's not shrink from the challenge before us simply because the path ahead seems hard. Let's uphold the mission of this body to address the threats to international peace and security that the Islamic Republic of Iran presents. And let's take real action in the name of this council by extending the arms embargo. Thank you all for allowing me to be here today.
Je remercie Son Excellence, M. Pompeo, de sa déclaration et je donne maintenant la parole au représentant de la Belgique.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I'm going to speak now in my national capacity. And let me start by welcoming the presence of the Secretary of State Pompeo. Mr. President, as Mrs. DiCarlo has just pointed out, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action is an important achievement of effective multilateralism. It is the result of 12 years of intense activity based on dialogue and diplomatic pressure. Belgium is joining forces with its European partners to defend it with conviction. The JCPOA is our best guarantee to ensure the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. However, in order to succeed, all parties need to implement its provisions in full and maintain the spirit of cooperation. Belgium, like the Secretary General and the majority of the members of this Council, regrets the withdrawal of the United States from the plan. My country also regrets the reimposition of US unilateral sanctions and their side effects, as well as the recent decision not to extend nuclear waivers. These sanctions prevent not only Iran, but also the other member states of the United Nations from implementing their commitments under Resolution 2231, resolution which was approved by all the members of this Council and supported by a large majority of the international community. Together with other European countries, Belgium has adhered to INSTEX in 2019 in order to uphold the economic benefits which form part of the JCPOA. Belgium regrets the increasing non-compliance by Iran of its commitments under the plan. Like our European partners, we reject any less for less approach. We call on Iran to return to full compliance with the JCPOA as soon as possible in order to prevent irreparable damage. We support the effort of France, Germany, and the UK to resolve the outstanding issues in the framework of the dispute resolution mechanism under the plan. Belgium continues to support the professional, objective, independent, and impartial work of the IAEA. It commends the agency's efforts to maintain monitoring and verification activities in Iran, despite the challenges, including those posed by the COVID-19 crisis. Mr. President, Belgium is concerned at Iran's continued ballistic activities and calls on Iran to comply with all provisions of Resolution 2231, including those listed in Annex B. Belgium is also worried by the assessments presented in the Secretary General report, as we just heard, that point to the Iranian origin of, first, transfers of conventional arms seized in the territorial Sea of Yemen, and second, of parts of the cruise missiles and the drones used in the attacks on Saudi Arabia last year. These activities reinforce mistrust and only contribute to the exacerbation of tensions in the region. It is clear that issues discussed today cannot be addressed in isolation from the regional dynamics at play. If we want long-lasting peace and security in the region, we must focus our attention on the broader regional context. The region urgently needs confidence-building measures between stakeholders and must work in good faith to solve its protracted conflicts. These regional concerns must be resolved by a proactive dialogue and by negotiations with all actors in the region. All relevant resolutions of this Council must also be observed. Mr. President, Belgium calls on all stakeholders to exercise restraint. Undermining the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action will not put us in a better position to discuss regional issues, nor will it provide us with a solution to the proliferation risks. Our priority as members of the Council should therefore be to preserve the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and to make it work. I thank you.
Je remercie le représentant de la Belgique pour sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de la République dominicaine.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, we salute the participation of the Secretary General in the discussion of this important matter. We welcome the presence of Secretary Pompeo and take this opportunity to also thank the speakers for their comprehensive briefing this morning, as well for their leadership. The Dominican Republic reiterates its firm support to the full and effective implementation of the JCPOA as a successful result of multilateral diplomacy and a great achievement of the non-proliferation architecture. We highlight the praiseworthy work of the IAEA in verifying and guaranteeing the peaceful uses of nuclear energy through its strict monitoring and verification systems. In addition, we recognize the determination and commitments shown by the parties to the full implementation of the agreement and efforts to preserve it, particularly those of the European states in fostering commercial activities with Iran with a view to guaranteeing that it receives the economic benefits as agreed and further alleviate the economic restrictions of the unilateral sanctions through the utilization of the INSTEX financial mechanism. We also condemn the recent request for the utilization of the procurement channel by some states and encourage its continued utilization and full support as the confidence building and transparency mechanism. On another aspect, we believe that the JCPOA is under great pressure, and the actions undertaken by some parties might significantly undermine the agreement. In this sense, we regret the measures taken by Iran to decrease some of its nuclear-related commitments as a result of the withdrawal of the United States from the plan. For the continued success of the JCPOA, it is fundamental to ensure full compliance of the provisions outlined in the agreement and in Security Council Resolution 2231 by Iran and other state parties to the plan. Therefore, we call on Iran to restore its full compliance in an irreversible manner. Moreover, we observe with concern the findings of the investigation carried out by the Secretariat on the attacks to oil facilities and to an international airport in Saudi Arabia last year, which concluded that the attacks were performed with cruise missiles of Iranian origin, as well as the investigation on the seized arms and components by the United States on the way to Yemen, which were also assessed to be Iranian origin and constitute a clear contravention to Resolution 2231. We reiterate our call on Iran to refrain from any destabilizing activity in the region, to avoid incurring in arms-related activities inconsistent with Resolution 2231, and from any action that can undermine the JCPOA. The JCPOA is the only instrument that guarantees the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program and consequently plays an important role in safeguarding the stability in the Middle East. Thus, it is imperative that parties to the agreement and the international community take the necessary measures to preserve it and ensure its full implementation, including through fostering avenues of dialogue and cooperation. To conclude, We would like to congratulate France for the excellent way in which they have presided over the Council during the month of June, and wish all the best to Germany as upcoming President of the Council for the month of July. I thank you.
Je remercie le représentant de la République dominicaine et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de la Tunisie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. I would like to thank Mr. Rosemary Di Carlo, USG, Ambassador Olaf Skoog, Ambassador Mark, Permanent Representative of Belgium, and Facilitator for the implementation of Resolution 2231 for their detailed briefings. I would like also to extend a warm welcome to the Permanent Representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Mr. President, Tunisia shares the view that the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action is an important addition to the global non-proliferation architecture and reiterates its call for the full and effective implementation of this agreement and of the Resolution 2231 by all parties. We believe indeed that it is of crucial importance for the security and stability of the Middle East to be able to continue to guarantee the status of Iran as a non-nuclear weapon state. In this regard, we note that Iran has emphasized on different occasions that all non-compliance measures it has taken are reversible and will continue to be subject to the monitoring and verification of the International Atomic Energy Agency. We call on Iran to fully cooperate with the AIEA and to continue to apply on a voluntary basis pending its ratification, the additional protocol to its safeguards agreement. Mr. President, Tunisia takes note of the continuing differences of interpretation regarding the implementation of the provision of Annex B of Resolution 2231, in particular with regard to ballistic missile-related activities. We understand that these provisions were designed to improve transparency and create an atmosphere conducive to the full implementation of the plan, and we urge all concerned parties to engage in a constructive dialogue to solve those differences. In the meantime, we encourage Iran to refrain from any activities that can deepen mistrust and exacerbate tension in the region, tension that have already reached an extremely dangerous level. In this regard, we are particularly concerned by the conclusion in the Secretary General's latest report on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231 that cruise missiles, parts thereof used in the attacks perpetrated against Saudi Arabia in 2019, are of Iranian origin. We reiterate our condemnation of these attacks and call all parties to avoid any action that could further aggravate the situation. Lastly, Mr. President, I would like to recall the conference on the establishment of Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction that held its first session in November 2019, and to which all Arab countries and in Iran participated constructively. This conference, decided by the General Assembly, should convene every year at the UN headquarters until it concludes the elaboration of a legally binding treaty establishing the Middle East zone. Notwithstanding the difference of views expressed during the process that led to the decision to convene the conference, we believe that it can become a very useful platform for regular dialogue and confidence building between concerned countries on all issues of non-proliferation, disarmament, and regional security, and help reduce significantly the tensions in the region. We therefore hope that all invited parties will be in a position to participate in the next session of the conference. I thank you.
Je remercie le représentant de la Tunisie pour sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de l'Afrique du Sud. Jerry, we don't hear you, Jerry. Mike, your mic. Yeah.
Mr. President, we thank the briefers for their extensive and valuable information. We recognize the presence of the UN Secretary General as well as the participation earlier of Secretary Mike Pompeo and later Prime Minister of Iran. I want to welcome the JCPOA as one of the most important diplomatic achievements in the area of nuclear non-proliferation since the signing of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test and Treaty. The JCPOA remains an example of global cooperation to address challenges that affect all of us. In this regard, we call all member states and parties to the JCPOA and the entire Security Council members to uphold and implement Resolution 2231/2015, which is essential for the Council fulfillment of its mandate to maintain international peace and security. Mr. President, we believe as South Africa, the Security Council should act responsibly and desist from any divisive actions that could provoke non-compliance with the Council's resolution, as this will undermine the credibility of the Council in fulfilling its central mandate. South Africa, therefore, Mr. President, urges Iran to fully implement its obligations under JCPOA in order to preserve its prospect for success. South Africa remains regretful about the withdrawal of the United States from the JCPOA and its reimpositions of unilateral sanctions measures on Iran. The United States must reconsider its stance in that regard, as its actions undermine understanding that have been previously reached by the entire Security Council. We also regret the decisions by the USA not to renew waivers for nuclear non-proliferation projects in the framework of JCPOA. It is our view as South Africa that the decisions by the US will inadvertently affect the ability of Iran to fully implement the provisions of the JCPOA and Resolution 2231. It will be important, Mr. President, to recall that the lifting of sanctions, especially on certain non-nuclear related material, was an integral part of the JCPOA. South Africa underscores that the total elimination of nuclear weapons is the only guarantee that they will never be used again by anyone under any circumstances. South Africa reminds the Council that the nuclear disarmament and nuclear non-proliferations are mutually reinforcing processes. Lack of progress on nuclear disarmament will inadvertently affect the gains made on nuclear non-proliferation. The horrors of 1945 should be in our mind as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and the end of very, very devastating war. We in South Africa, that is why we gave up our nuclear weapons and joined the global movement towards a nuclear-free world. Regarding the broader security of the region, South Africa joins others in expressing its concern about the growing tension in the Gulf and its impact on international peace and security. South Africa urges all parties involved to exercise utmost restraint and not allow the situation to get out of hand. This Council must pursue steps to de-escalate rather than escalate tension in the Gulf and support any such efforts undertaken by the region. In this regard, Mr. President, this Council must support initiatives aimed at the restoration of peace and stability, not only in the Gulf, but in the broader Middle East region. Mr. President, we are all consumed by a coronavirus pandemic. Over 5 million people, all of our people worldwide, have been affected by this COVID-19. And over 500,000 have perished. These are our people. These are all our people. in all countries, origins of the world. No one is spared. Therefore, Mr. President, let's close ranks and fight this invincible monster together. Now is not the time to quarrel and fight against each other. Solidarity to save humankind and humanity should be the watchword. South Africa is therefore resolute on its support for the continuation of efforts to resolve tensions between all actors in the region and promote dialogue rather than antagonism in order to safeguard gains already made in terms of disarmament and non-proliferation, which are essential for the maintenance of broader international peace and security. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant de l'Afrique du Sud pour sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de la Chine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I thank Under-Secretary General DiCarlo, Ambassador Paxton, and Ambassador Sigurd for their briefings. The JCPOA is an important multilateral agreement endorsed by Resolution 2231. It's legally binding and should be effectively implemented. Earlier this month, Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi clearly stated China's position on the Iranian nuclear issue in his letter to Secretary General Guterres and the President of the Security Council. Preserving the JCPOA is conducive to safeguarding multilateralism, the international order based on international law, the international non-proliferation regime, and peace and stability in the Middle East. The root cause of current crisis is the U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA and its unilateral sanctions against Iran. As stated in Secretary General's report, these actions continue to be contrary to the goals set out in the JCPOA and the Resolution 2231. The U.S. has decided to end the sanctions waiver to nuclear projects under the agreement and pushed for extension of arms embargo on Iran. This has again undermined the joint efforts to preserve the JCPOA. We urge the U.S. to stop its illegal unilateral sanctions and long-arm jurisdiction and return to the right track of observing the JCPOA and Resolution 2231. China opposes the U.S. push for extending arms embargo on Iran. All provisions of Resolution 2231 should be implemented, including arrangements on arms-related restrictive measures. Having quit the JCPOA, the U.S. is no longer a participant and has no right to trigger snapback at the Security Council. The Iranian nuclear issue is at a critical stage. The full and effective implementation of the JCPOA is the only right way forward. Iran's reduction of its commitment under the JCPOA is a result of the U.S. maximum pressure. Relevant parties should exercise restraint, resolve differences through consultations in the Joint Commission, and refrain from taking steps that might complicate the situation. China disapproves of the recent resolution of IAEA's Board of Governors on Iran's safeguards. We call on all parties to pay due attention to Iran's readiness for continued cooperation with the agency and to find the solutions at an early date. The Iranian nuclear issue concerns the peace and the stability in the Middle East. Maintaining the JCPOA is in the interests of all parties. Regional countries should resolve disputes through dialogue and negotiation. Countries outside the region should inject positive energy into the region's peace and stability. All parties should work constructively to de-escalate the situation and promote settlement of hotspot issues in the region. Mr. President, the Secretary General's report underlines the importance of safeguarding the JCPOA and calls upon member states to avoid provocative rhetoric and the actions. We welcome the report. We also welcome the participation of the Secretary General in today's meeting. The report welcomes the positive development in the INSTEX, encourages member states to fully support and utilize the procurement channel, and supports member states' trade and economic relations with Iran, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. China appreciates that. Meanwhile, China agrees with some countries that the report should remain fact-based and reflect the implementation of the resolution in an objective, balanced, and comprehensive manner. The 2231 format is not a sanction mechanism. The Secretariat should act in strict accordance with its mandate and function. The report failed to fully accommodate and reflect the legitimate concerns of Iran. It also made conclusions on issues such as origin of weapons simply based on one-sided information. This is deeply regrettable. China hopes to bring this to the high attention of the Secretariat. China has noticed that some countries expressed concerns over Iran's missile and satellite launch. Iran has clarified the conventional and self-defensive nature of its missile program on many occasions. It's important that all parties accurately interpret the resolution so as to avoid negative impact on the implementation of the JCPOA. Mr. President, since the conclusion of the JCPOA, China has been committed to upholding the authority of the resolution and the efficacy of the JCPOA. China stands ready to work tirelessly with relevant parties to seek political and diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear issue. The Security Council should earnestly fulfill its responsibilities and stand with international law, multilateralism, and peace and dialogue. We cannot afford to allow the Iranian nuclear issue to go back to the old track of pressure and confrontation. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant de la Chine pour sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de l'Allemagne.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Our friend from the Dominican Republic, Jose, in his intervention reminded us that from tomorrow onwards, Germany will have the presidency of the UN Security Council. Germany at the same time will start his presidency of the European Union. Both are very important for us. They are kind of the cornerstones of our post-Second World War policy. Why is this? Because for both organizations, the foundation is the rule of law, rules-based international order. For us, the Charter of the UN, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are key for our policy. So when I talk a bit about the rule of law today, it has to do with this very foundation of German foreign policy. And I take the occasion of the presence of the Iranian foreign minister to talk about the rule of law and to talk about Iran. Unfortunately, Iran is violating the very basis of what we are discussing here at the UN, the Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The human rights situation in Iran is appalling. Human rights activists are pursued. There are political prisoners. there is no press freedom, no right of assembly. There is aggressive foreign policy meddling in the region, and Iran does not only not recognize Israel, but it displays missiles written on it, "Death to Israel." This is all very appalling. Now, with regard to the rule of law, I come to the 22 to 2231. This is a part of this rule of law that is very important, and we believe the 2231 resolution is one of the most important ones that we have. And I'd like to thank the Secretary General and his team for the thorough investigation, which found out the developments that are contrary and inconsistent with 2231. To respond to a colleague from China, we believe that the Secretariat is absolutely mandated to pursue this work. The Secretary General is it has the task to combat threats or peace and security, and therefore has to do everything to preserve this. With regard to the position on 2231, Germany would like to align itself with what UK and France, as other E3 members, are going to say. I would also, since China also is a signatory, I would also align myself what my Chinese colleague just said about the snapback mechanism. The overarching goal for us is the preservation and the continuation, the full implementation of Resolution 2231 of the JCPOA. The JCPOA, which has been described in some media as a masterpiece of diplomacy. And thanks to the JCPOA, it was possible to have Iran step back from its moves towards the acquisition of a nuclear bomb. It is very unfortunate that the United States left the JCPOA, and by doing this, leaving, actually violating international law, because the JCPOA is enshrined in a binding resolution in Resolution 2231. We are very concerned that now we see Iran stepping away from the JCPOA. It was highlighted in the report. Thank you very much, Rosemary DiCarlo, for your report, where you clearly indicated where Iran is stepping back from JCPOA. I mean, to use maybe a picture for this, now that when you have a traffic light and somebody runs a red light and violating international law, this is no justification for another driver also to run a red light and to violate international law. So Iran should engage constructively with the remaining JCPOA signatures. We have, as an E3, because of these violations by Iran, have invoked the dispute resolution mechanism, a measure within the framework of the JCPOA. Just as we fully uphold our commitments as an E3, and we even go beyond our commitments when it comes to the INSTEX mechanism, we are concerned about the US not only leaving the JCPOA, but also ending the waivers for key JCPOA projects. We, the E3 Germany, we remain committed to these projects, including the Arak modernization project. We are concerned about Iran, about the missile activities that are reported in the Secretary General's paper. They're inconsistent with Resolution 2231. As E3, we have informed the Secretary General, we have informed the Security Council about those violations. On the conventional arms embargo, we share the concerns on the implications of the expiration of these limitations. On the other hand, we remind that the MTCR listed items, these sanctions remain in place. Also that the transfers of arms by Iran to non-state actors will remain prohibited according to other UN Security Council resolutions. And we think we can build on these discussions on and consider how best to address the expiry of arms embargo. We are ready to engage with the JCPOA members and also with UNSC members how best to do that. Again, let me finish and reminding that we just celebrated the 75th anniversary of the United Nations Charter. This is the basis for our rules-based international order. Multilateralism is about commitments and reliability, and I would like to appeal to everybody to return to 2231 and to the JCPOA and implement it. Thank you.
Je remercie le représentant de l'Allemagne pour sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant du Royaume-Uni.
Thank you, Mr. President, and may I also thank Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing today, and of course welcome Olaf Skog, Secretary Pompeo, and Foreign Minister Zarif to the Council today. It's also good to see the Secretary General here. Mr. President, the United Kingdom welcomes the Secretary General's 9th report on the implementation of UNSCR 2231. We offer our thanks to the Secretariat for their continued professionalism and the support they provide to the Secretary General in enabling the production of this report. The Secretary General and his team are fully mandated to thoroughly investigate and report on activities which are contrary to or inconsistent with Resolution 2231. And we support the findings set out in this impartial and professional report. Mr. President, together with our French and German colleagues, and I take this opportunity to align myself with the statement of our German representative, and I am sure to align myself with the statement that you'll be making later, Mr. President, the United Kingdom has frequently restated our full commitment to the JCPOA in line with our collective security interests, which include upholding the nuclear non-proliferation regime and preventing Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. We have also frequently stated our unequivocal regret and concern at the United States' decision to leave the JCPOA and to reimpose sanctions on Iran. We understand the continued impact this has had in Iran and on the Iranian people. Since May 2018, we have worked tirelessly to preserve the JCPOA. We have fully upheld our commitments, and we have gone beyond our obligations to develop INSTEX, which is operational and facilitating transactions. Mr. President, the United Kingdom deeply regrets that since 2019, Iran has taken nuclear measures contrary to its commitments under the JCPOA. These measures seriously undermine the non-proliferation benefits of the agreement. This is the reason that the E3 initiated the JCPOA's dispute resolution mechanism on the 14th of January, as one of the last tools under the agreement to find a diplomatic way forward and bring Iran back into compliance with the deal. Mr. President, 2020 has seen a continuation of Iran's destabilizing activity around the Middle East, including activities which are inconsistent with UNSCR 2231 and other resolutions. As we have noted previously, Iran's ballistic missile technologies pose a threat to regional security, both in their role as a potential delivery system for weapons of mass destruction, but more immediately in their enabling role as the means of delivery for the increasingly lethal conventional payloads developed by Iran. We are deeply concerned by Iran's development of advanced technologies under the guise of space launch vehicle research, and the roles these technologies play in supporting Iran's military ballistic missile program. We reject Iran's claims that the Qased system used in their most recent launch is not a military launch system. In addition to the self-proclaimed role of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in the launch, Iran's official reports show a transporter erector launcher characteristic of military ballistic missiles and not a static launch stand or gantry of the type normally associated with civilian space launch vehicles. We recognize the high caliber of Iran's scientific community and its desire to participate in the exploration of space and advancement of scientific knowledge, but we encourage Iran to join other multinational space exploration endeavors. Iran must not develop launch systems in contravention of UNSCR 2231. Mr. President, the Secretary General's report clearly details how Iran actively proliferates missile technology throughout the region, including to non-state actors. As well as violating several Council resolutions, these actions are destabilizing for the region and escalate already high tensions. If Iran wants to be a responsible actor, it should stop. We note the findings in the Secretary General's report that materials seized by the United States in December 2019 and February 2020 was consistent with weaponry either manufactured in Iran or found to have been transferred to Iran after 2016. We further note the report's conclusion, achieved through thorough analysis of the wreckage of the attacks, that weaponry used in the Aramco attacks, as well as in the Afif and Abba attacks, were of Iranian origin and were identical in material, structure, and assembly to that Iranian weaponry seized by the United States. The Aramco attack was reckless, destabilizing, and completely unacceptable, affecting more than 5% of the world's oil and gas production. As well as having implications for the world's energy supply, the attack risked undermining efforts to stabilize the region. This attack followed the 2019 attacks on commercial shipping near Fujairah and in the Gulf of Oman on the Yanbu oil pipeline. The United Kingdom has performed thorough assessments and, as we have previously noted, we believe that all these attacks were almost certainly carried out by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. As I said at the outset, the United Kingdom remains committed to the full implementation of Resolution 2231. But in light of the aforementioned concerns and the detail contained in the Secretary General's report, we believe that the planned lifting of arms restrictions on Iran in October would have major implications for regional security and stability. We are committed to working with JCPOA partners and Security Council members to address these concerns. E3 foreign ministers have stated that unilateral attempts to trigger UN sanctions snapback would be incompatible with our current efforts to preserve the JCPOA. Preservation of the JCPOA will continue to be the guiding principle for the E3 on this agenda. This is because we believe, in the absence of a viable alternative, that the agreement provides the best means of achieving our shared objectives on regional security and stability, upholding the nuclear non-proliferation regime, and ensuring the continued authority and integrity of the Security Council. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant du Royaume-Uni pour sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de l'Estonie.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I thank all briefers this morning for their statements and for their hard work in carrying out their respective functions. Allow me to thank also the Secretary General and the Secretariat team for their continued professionalism by providing a well-researched and comprehensive report. I will start by expressing Estonia's support to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The JCPOA is a key element in global nuclear non-proliferation architecture and crucial for regional and wider international security. As the JCPOA is currently the only assurance for the international community regarding Iran's nuclear program, we do not want to see it collapse. Nevertheless, Iran's announcement in May 2019 to reduce its nuclear-related commitments under the plan and the following steps taken are extremely concerning and worrisome. as they indicate a serious threat of nuclear proliferation. Although we commend that Iran continues to cooperate with the IAEA under the JCPOA, we note with concern Iran's recent lack of cooperation with the agency's investigations under the Safeguards Agreement. Since cooperation with the IAEA is crucial in order to provide necessary assurances of the absence of undeclared nuclear material and activities, Estonia supported the resolution adopted at the latest IAEA Board of Governors meeting. Estonia welcomes our European partners' efforts to address and find a viable solution to the issues of non-compliance of the JCPOA within its framework, and note the triggering of the dispute resolution mechanism by France, Germany, and the United Kingdom in January this year. We hope that other participants of the JCPOA engage constructively and substantively in this process. The preservation and full implementation of the JCPOA also includes the compliance with all the provisions of the Security Council Resolution 2231, including the restrictive measures set out in Annex B of the resolution. The Secretary General's report outlines Iran's continued non-compliance with several of the provisions in regards to its ballistic missile-related activities and transfer of various arms to other actors in the Middle East. The report gives, therefore, rise to serious concerns. The Secretary General's report offers a detailed examination of the weapons seized by the United States in November 2019 and February 2020, and concludes that they were of Iranian origin and may have been transferred in a manner inconsistent with Resolution 2231. Moreover, some of the items were similar or identical to those used in the attacks against Saudi Arabia's oil facilities and its international airport. We also note with concern the information provided in the report regarding the launches by Iran of space launch vehicles in 2 instances. In undertaking such activity, Iran is not providing confidence that it is not developing technology capable of serving as a means of delivery of nuclear weapons. Such weapons for proliferation activities have a highly destabilizing effect to the region and only feed into the escalation of tensions. These very concerning activities do not lend any support to the planned expiry of the conventional arms restrictions this October as established by Resolution 2231. To conclude, Estonia calls all parties to remain committed to the full and effective implementation of the JCPOA and of the Resolution 2231. It is our common responsibility as members of the international community to work together to preserve the nuclear agreement and reach a diplomatic settlement through constructive dialogue and in good faith. We fully support efforts that are conducive to international peace.
We want to welcome His Excellency Mr. Mohammad Abbas Zarif, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iran, to the meeting. Mr. President, over the recent months, we have witnessed with deep concern that tension and mistrust continue to build up in the region regarding the implementation of JCPOA and the Resolution 2231. More than ever, it is important that the current situation must be diffused to maintain peace and security in the region. In this regard, we would like to highlight the following points. First, we take note of the 9th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231. We stress that restriction and control measures under the Resolution 2231 are to promote the full compliance and implementation of the JCPOA. Second, we would like to reaffirm our consistent position of supporting disarmament and non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear weapons. We also respect the right of the country to use nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, in accordance with the international law and their obligation under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Third, we support measures of resolving all issues through dialogue, negotiation, in accordance with international law. We therefore support the implementation of Resolution 2231, with its aim to promote the compliance and implementation of the JCPOA. We call all relevant parties to continue dialogue and negotiation to resolve differences and fully implement Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA. It is important for all parties to exercise restraints and refrain from any action that could exacerbate the situation, erode trust, and escalate tensions. In conclusion, peace and security in the Middle East will reverberate far beyond the region. Therefore, it is necessary for the United Nations Security Council to carefully consider every issue related to the Resolution 2231. Members of the United Nations Security Council should actively be engaged in the discussion so as to create the environment of cooperation and dialogue amongst parties in the implementation of Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA. It is necessary for all of us to maintain peace, stability, and uphold the international law and obligation for a safe and prosperous world for all. From our part, Vietnam is willing to make positive contribution to this process. And thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant du Vietnam de sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant du Niger.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, allow me at the outset to welcome the convening of this briefing for the consideration of the ninth report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231. His presence today is a sign of the interest he attaches to this issue. I would like to thank Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo and the Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, Ambassador Mark Pechstein, Permanent Representative of Belgium in his capacity as facilitator, and Mr. Olaf Skog, Head of the Delegation of the European Union in his capacity as Coordinator of the Joint Commission to the Security Council for their briefings. We are honored by the presence of the United States Secretary of State, Mr. Michael Pompeo, and of Mr. Mohammad Javad Zarif, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and I wish them warm welcome. Mr. President, I wish to reaffirm Niger's commitment to the full implementation of Resolution 2231, which approved in 2015 the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action JCPOA on the Iranian nuclear program. My delegation has taken note of the conclusions of the ninth report of the Secretary General on the implementation of this resolution and calls on member states and all stakeholders to comply with the obligations they have undertaken. It is indisputable that the action plan, as an expression of the will of the international community supported by the Security Council, is an essential instrument in the fight against nuclear proliferation. In this regard, it must be preserved. That is why we deplore both the withdrawal of the United States from this agreement with its resulting consequences, as well as the measures taken in response to this since 8 May 2019 by the Islamic Republic of Iran to backtrack on certain commitments it has made with regard to the nuclear disarmament within the framework of the plan of action. In this regard, we urge all parties to the agreement to strictly implement its provisions in terms of both obligations and rights. As it is customary to say, legally formed agreements serve as law for those who made them. Should difficulties arise in the implementation of the provisions of this agreement, recourse should be made to the dispute settlement mechanism provided for in the plan of action. For my country, Niger, while there is no doubt that the Islamic Republic of Iran must respect its obligations under the agreement, in particular by submitting to the control measures of the International Atomic Energy Agency, so as to eliminate any risk of proliferation, there should be no doubt that the international community must lay the foundations for a new relationship with the Islamic Republic of Iran based on mutual trust and respect. Therefore, it is urgent, in accordance with the appeal by the Secretary General of the United Nations, to alleviate on humanitarian grounds all unilateral economic measures which could prevent Iran from mobilizing the means to combat the current COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. President, if the implementation of the JCPOA is to be pursued in good faith, it is no exaggeration to say that the situation currently prevailing in the Persian Gulf region carries within it the seeds of suspicion and mistrust, which make it difficult to establish a climate of trust between states. The worrying prospect of the forthcoming annexation of the occupied Palestinian territories are not, alas, cause for optimism. It could, if nothing is done, and this is indeed the right time to do something, add to the difficulties that concern us today by plunging the entire region into cycles of violence which unforeseeable consequences could have incalculable repercussions for international peace and security. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant du Niger pour sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de la Fédération de Russie.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we welcome the participation in today's meeting of the Secretary General, and I welcome in particular Minister Zarif, who is with us now. I would have welcomed the participation of Secretary of State, but he is no longer with us. I understand he has a very busy schedule, but we regret that he didn't choose to listen to council members, at least some of them. But more than that, we regret that in his statement, I didn't, at least myself, I didn't hear a single time, a single word, dialogue or cooperation. Mr. President, I would like to thank Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo for presenting the report of the Secretary General on the implementation of the Security Council Resolution 2231. We also welcome the contribution of the permanent representative of Belgium, a Security Council facilitator, to its implementation. We highly appreciate his efforts to uphold the unity of the Security Council members and to this end negotiate the consensus facilitators report, even though it has not been approved. Mr. President, to our deep regret, the world of multilateralism and order, where the principle pacta sunt servanda used to be respected through centuries, is at a risk. The US policy of unilateral actions disregards both common sense and the opinions of other states. We've been watching with grave concern the policy of maximum pressure on Iran, which is better characterized as a maximum suffocation policy. Iran is being deliberately squeezed from all directions. The task is to achieve regime change or create a situation where Iran literally wouldn't be able to breathe. This is like putting a knee to one's neck. The responsibility of the current crisis belongs to the United States. 2 years ago, it intentionally started to undermine the carefully balanced and calibrated agreement of 2015, which both the Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA constituted an inseparable package deal. despite the fact that Security Council resolutions are a part of international law and must be implemented by all member states, the US officially pulled out from its Resolution 2231 and JCPOA obligations, closed the door behind, and engaged in unilateral pressure by reimposing and reinforcing national sanctions against Iran, which are contrary to the aims of both the JCPOA and Resolution 2231. Such actions eliminate any incentives for Tehran to comply with their provisions. Still, Iran continued to uphold its obligations under JCPOA. On top of it, the United States, being a major violator, has been threatening other countries with unilateral sanctions for the implementation of Resolution 2231, which, as I said, is not an option, but an obligation of member states. Mr. President, the road to JCPOA was very bumpy. Everybody was making concessions to achieve this carefully calibrated deal, including, first and foremost, Iran itself. The whole world was celebrating this unique achievement and the system of checks and balances, of which temporary arms embargo, arms restrictions on Iran, were only one element. It was introduced with clear and unequivocal understanding that it will expire on October 18, 2020, provided Iran sticks to its obligations under the JCPOA. And Iran honored its commitment, despite 2 years of continued US threats and sanctions. But today we see that the US appeals to the authority of the Security Council to demonstrate unity of vision and adopt a new arms embargo resolution against Iran. We explained in detail our position in this regard in the letter of Minister Sergei Lavrov to the President of the Security Council of May 27, 2020, which was distributed in the Council. We cannot accept an attempt to get a blessing for the US-designed maximum pressure policy through the Security Council and to legitimize it. We have a special mandate and responsibility here to protect the legitimate interests of all states and maintain international peace and security. The logic of US draft that was presented is to impose a full-scale blockade on Iran by all means possible. It is obvious that the ultimate goal is to antagonize Iran and to push it to radical retaliation, which will become an invitation for further sanctions. What we get in the end is an uncontrollable escalation, a destabilized region, and lasting implications for international peace and security. Is this the remedy to resolve the current crisis we are looking for? Making Iran a scapegoat for everything that is happening in the region is a seemingly easy approach, but simplifying things, coming to easy but questionable and arguable solutions, to which I think we are all unfortunately accustomed, is not a magic solution to the problems the region is facing. Moreover, this simplistic approach does not bring us closer to solutions. It only complicates problems. We would like to reiterate that there are neither legal nor other grounds to raise this issue of arms embargo in the Security Council. The approval-based procedures for transfer of armaments to and from Iran have been designed as temporary measure, and their extension after 18 October 2020 has never been either envisaged or discussed. Given all this, it would be at least naive to suggest that there can be a room for engaging the Security Council on this issue. Brian Hook, the US Special Representative on Iran, chose to accuse Russia and China in engaging in anti-utopia in our positions on Iran. I don't know what prompted him to come to such escapades and what exactly he meant by that. Maybe he has just finished reading George Orwell or Ray Bradbury or Aldous Huxley or some Russian anti-utopia writers, which we have plenty, by the way. But if we take it as a statement, then I'm compelled to say that Russia in particular is engaging in anti-utopia because US is engaging in utopia. We said from day one that the US draft on Iran's embargo is a utopia. It will not fly, and it is not a basis for any negotiations. During these 2 years, the US was trying in vain to prove to us that Iran was violating its commitments under the JCPOA. In fact, the only moves that Iran was making were aimed at to show its frustration with US provocative actions. But even those moves, strictly speaking, did not violate the JCPOA. In this regard, we would like to express our profound disappointment with the 9th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231. It clearly fails to meet the high standards of impartiality that are expected to be observed in such documents. The Secretariat has never been mandated with investigative tasks, including at invitation of individual states. The Security Council has been effectively kept in the dark about these activities, being faced and presented with ready-made judgments. The group that conducted those investigations has neither attributive or prosecutorial mandates. But today we hear from our fellow Security Council members statements in the spirit of almost certainly or highly likely, as if we operate not with allegations, but with established facts. We regret to see that as a result of these amateur inspections, the report suffers from a chronic lack of evidence. Final assessments of Iran's involvement in the activities in violation of the Security Council Resolution 2231 are baseless and biased. It is unfortunate that in these turbulent times, this document fuels the tensions rather than contributes to their solution. Mr. President, while addressing the issue we are discussing, we must not forget about a broader picture. Today, I witness spiraling escalation in the Persian Gulf, jeopardizing peace and security in the region, as well as the international efforts to settle conflicts there. We believe that there is a viable alternative to it. There should be a comprehensive strategic solution which could help build trust, bring stability, transparency, and predictability among regional players. The ultimate goal is to establish a genuinely inclusive security architecture that reflects the legitimate concerns of all countries of the region. Regional confidence-building measures could be instrumental in this regard. Our concept for security architecture in the Persian Gulf and the international guarantees remains relevant. Russia is also ready to support similar initiatives by working with our regional partners and all interested parties. In conclusion, Mr. President, I would like to emphasize that Russia is fully committed to the unconditional implementation of its obligations under the Security Council Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA. We call on all member states to make every effort to preserve the JCPOA. We will continue to pursue and encourage dialogue aimed at finding compromises with a balance of interests at its core. Such measures could be taken on all levels of political communication. Russia, together with other responsible members of the international community, will spare no effort to bring the current situation back under control. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant de la Fédération de Russie pour sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole au représentant de l'Indonésie.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. President. We first of all like to thank the Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo, Ambassador Olof Skog, and Ambassador Mark Paxton de Buchberg for their briefings. We especially would like to thank Ambassador Mark and his team for the able leadership in facilitating the 2331 format. We also would like to welcome the participation of Secretary General Guterres, Secretary of State Michael Pompeo, and Minister Muhammad Javad Zarif. Today we stand at a very critical moment we could not emphasize enough the importance of supporting the full and effective implementation of the GCPOA and Resolution 2231 by all parties. In this regard, Indonesia underlines the following points. First, preserving GCPOA and Resolution 2231 is crucially important. All parties must remain committed and perform fully and effectively their obligation under the GCPOA and Resolution 2231 in good faith. In this regard, we are deeply concerned with the decision of the United States to withdraw from the GCPOA and to reimpose sanctions. Efforts must be made to create a conducive environment for the GCPOA implementation. All factors should be taken into account in a just manner in assessing the GCPOA implementation. We also take note with concern the announcement by Iran to scale back of its operational commitments under the GCPOA. We call on all parties to swiftly resolve this issue through constructive dialogue and appropriate dispute resolution mechanism under the agreement to allow Iran to return to its commitments. We recognize and support the efforts of our European partners to facilitate all legitimate trade with Iran. We should always remind ourselves that the GCPOA should also bring concrete economic benefit for Iran and its peoples. Second, stability must be maintained. All parties must exercise restraint. Extra caution needs to be taken before coming to a conclusion or taking any action, as rash decisions can become counterproductive. Any new initiative must add value and support Resolution 2231. We need to remain focused. The aim must be to enable success in the implementation of Resolution 2231. The issues that are not directly related with the GCPOA and Resolution 2231 should be treated separately. In this vein, Indonesia emphasizes the upholding of the rule of law as well as the UN Charter with the spirit of multilateralism. We should also not forget the importance of confidence building and continuing dialogue to find amicable solution. That is what diplomacy is all about. Third point, the importance of cooperation with the IAEA. We welcome the continuation of cooperation between Iran and IAEA in safeguarding its nuclear program under the GCPOA. We would like to convey our appreciation for the professional work of the agency. We support the IAEA to conduct its mandate in an impartial and objective manner in verifying and monitoring Iran's implementation of its nuclear-related commitment under the GCPOA. Fourth, a world free of nuclear weapons must be achieved. Remaining focused, we must not be sidetracked by other rhetoric that hampers progress on the global nuclear disarmament agenda. Indonesia's position on this, nationally as well as the coordinator of the Non-Aligned Movement Working Group on Disarmament, is very clear. Further, Indonesia is a party to the major treaties in this area, including the Southeast Asia Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone. We are also a passionate advocate of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and urge its early into force and universalization. Indonesia believes that the GCPOA remains an essential element of the global non-proliferation architecture. The obligation to support the GCPOA fully does not only apply to its signatories, but to all in the international community. Everyone should play their role to support its sustainability and original objective. Mr. President, before I conclude, my delegation would like to express its concern with regard to the fact that the facilitator report cannot be agreed by all Council members. In this regard, we urge all members of the Council to maintain communication and close cooperation to allow us to exercise our mandate properly. We thank the facilitator of the format for his endeavor on this process and stand ready to work with all Council members in finding agreement on the way forward. Mr. President, let me conclude by reiterating once again Indonesia's support for the full and effective implementation of the GCPOA and Resolution 2231. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant de l'Indonésie pour sa déclaration et je donne à présent la parole à la représentante de Saint-Vincent et les Grenadines.
Thank you, Mr. President. We recognize the participation of Secretary General, the U.S. Secretary of State, and the Minister in today's important meeting. We also thank USG DeCarlo, Ambassador Skoog and Ambassador Pechstein for their briefings. St. Vincent and the Grenadines welcomes the 9th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231. We are dedicated to the full implementation of the resolution, and we strongly support the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The JCPOA is a key pillar of the global nuclear non-proliferation architecture and multilateral diplomacy. Its preservation is crucial to safeguard peace and stability in the region and the wider world. We deeply regret the United States withdrawal from the JCPOA and its subsequent decisions to reimpose sanctions to terminate waivers. These actions are contrary to the requirements and goals of Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA, and they do not encourage an environment conducive to international cooperation. We encourage the United States to rejoin the agreement and to lift all sanctions. The appeal for a removal of these sanctions has become even more urgent considering the COVID-19 pandemic, as they considerably undermine and impede the COVID-19 response and mitigation efforts. We also regret the Islamic Republic of Iran's decision to cease performing several of its nuclear-related commitments under the JCPOA. We take note that Iran has indicated that these steps are reversible, having undertaken them subsequent to the United States withdrawal from the agreement. We urge Iran to return to full compliance to meet the totality of its obligations. It is our hope that despite recent declarations, Iran will remain a party to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. Mr. President, St. Vincent and the Grenadines supports the mandate of the International Atomic Energy Agency as it works towards ensuring peaceful uses of nuclear science and technology. The important role of the IAEA plays in the verification and monitoring of compliance with Resolution 2231 cannot be overstated. We recognize Iran's cooperation with the IAEA thus far, and we encourage further cooperation in implementing its NPT Safeguards Agreement and additional protocol. We welcome the developments made in relation to the instrument in support of trade exchanges. These advancements are essential to the normalization of trade and economic relations with Iran. We also take note of the activities of the procurement channel. This channel must remain operational and effective to ensure that a new relationship is indeed cultivated with Iran. The JCPOA remains the only viable path to ensure a peaceful, comprehensive, and long-term solution to the Iranian nuclear issue. In this regard, we implore all parties to fully implement their obligations under the agreement. Further, we urge all sides to exercise maximum restraint, to refrain from actions that continue to inflame tensions, and to commit fully to dialogue and negotiation to resolve the current issues and preserve the JCPOA. In closing, St. Vincent and the Grenadines reaffirms its commitment to achieving a nuclear weapons-free world. As a member of the Committee of Latin American and the Caribbean Zone of Peace and a party to the Tlatelolco Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the NPT and the Treaty of the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, we appeal to the international community to remain steadfast in its commitment to disarmament, as this is inextricably linked to non-proliferation. I thank you.
Je remercie la représentante de Saint-Vincent et les Grenadines pour sa déclaration. Et je vais à présent faire une déclaration en ma qualité de représentant de la France. Je souhaite remercier le secrétaire général, le secrétaire d'État américain et le ministre iranien des Affaires étrangères pour leur participation. Merci aussi aux briefers pour leurs interventions. Notre priorité reste de nous assurer que l'Iran ne se dote pas de l'arme nucléaire. Il s'agit d'un enjeu de prolifération et donc de paix et de sécurité qui nous affecte et nous préoccupe tous. C'est pour cela que la France, l'Allemagne et le Royaume-Uni ont œuvré dès 2003 pour résoudre la crise ouverte sur le programme nucléaire iranien. Et nous avons pu trouver en 2015 une issue à cette crise grâce à la persévérance de la communauté internationale et à la convergence à partir de 2006 autour de la ligne portée par les E3 et au dialogue robuste avec l'Iran. Le Conseil de sécurité n'a pas seulement endossé l'accord de Vienne par la résolution 2231, il a validé une méthode, celle d'un multilatéralisme pragmatique et exigeant, méthode qui était alors portée par ses 5 membres permanents dans l'unité et avec constance et exemplarité. Nous prenons tous la mesure des défis du moment. Les trajectoires des États signataires ont divergé depuis la sortie des États-Unis de l'accord, à notre grand regret et préoccupation. Après cela, l'Iran a, de manière inquiétante, pris des mesures contraires à ses engagements au titre de l'accord. Celles-ci ont des conséquences graves en matière de prolifération. C'est la raison pour laquelle les E3 ont activé en janvier dernier le mécanisme de résolution des différends du JCPOA, afin de traiter ce problème grave, mais le traiter dans le cadre de l'accord. La France, l'Allemagne et le Royaume-Uni ont pleinement mis en œuvre leurs engagements. Nous restons attachés à préserver l'accord et à poursuivre des discussions afin de ramener l'Iran au plein respect de ses engagements au titre du JCPOA. Cela requiert un engagement constructif de l'Iran et de tous. Nous venons d'entendre la confirmation très préoccupante de violation par l'Iran des dispositions de la résolution 2231 sur les transferts d'armes. Les conclusions du secrétaire général, que nous soutenons, concordent avec notre évaluation. Je veux être clair, ces activités déstabilisatrices que nous avons condamnées sont inacceptables et doivent cesser. Comme la déclaration ministérielle E3 de Berlin du 19 juin en témoigne, la France, avec l'Allemagne et le Royaume-Uni, comprend et partage les préoccupations concernant les implications de l'expiration à venir de l'embargo sur les armes classiques prévu par la résolution 2231. Nous avons dit être prêts à explorer des options constructives pour répondre à nos préoccupations communes, y compris en dehors de ce Conseil. Nous entendons traiter cette question en étroite concertation avec tous les membres de ce Conseil et en particulier les participants restants au JCPOA et les autres acteurs clés. Nous resterons guidés par les objectifs suivants: le respect de l'autorité et de l'intégrité du Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies et la volonté d'œuvrer à la stabilité et à la sécurité régionale. Nous ne soutiendrons pas, en revanche, de propositions unilatérales aboutissant au retour des sanctions. Elle ne ferait qu'approfondir les divisions au sein du Conseil de sécurité et, au-delà, ne serait pas susceptible d'améliorer la situation sur le terrain de la non-prolifération nucléaire. Comme l'ont déclaré les ministres des Affaires étrangères de la France, de l'Allemagne et du Royaume-Uni le 19 juin dernier à Berlin, nous sommes fermement convaincus que toute tentative unilatérale de recourir au mécanisme de snapback des sanctions aurait de graves conséquences au Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies. Nous ne soutiendrions pas une telle décision qui serait incompatible avec nos efforts actuels pour préserver le JCPOA. Tous les membres de ce Conseil ont en commun des intérêts fondamentaux de sécurité. Ils nous rassemblent autour d'objectifs et responsabilités partagées. C'est la raison d'être de ce Conseil et l'esprit qui nous anime tous. Je veux donc croire qu'aucun d'entre nous ne risquerait un retour en arrière qui exacerberait les tensions au Moyen-Orient. Le JCPOA, qui est le résultat d'un compromis, peut bien sûr être vu comme un instrument perfectible, mais il n'existe à ce jour aucune alternative sérieuse pour empêcher l'Iran de se doter de l'arme nucléaire, et sa disparition n'améliorerait ni la situation régionale, ni la sécurité de nos populations. Nous avons certes des différences d'approche, mais c'est ensemble que nous devons bâtir une stratégie globale sur tous les volets du dossier iranien, les yeux ouverts, sans naïveté, avec pragmatisme et lucidité. C'est cet objectif de long terme que nous souhaitons privilégier en préservant l'ordre international fondé sur le droit dont nous sommes les garants. I would like to thank the Secretary General, the US Secretary of State, and the Iranian Foreign Minister for their participation. Thanks also to the briefers for their interventions. Our priority remains to ensure that Iran does not acquire nuclear weapons. This is a proliferation issue and therefore a peace and security issue that affects and concerns us all. That is why France, Germany, and the UK have been working since 2003 to resolve the crisis over Iran's nuclear program. And we were able to find a way out of the crisis in 2015, thanks to the perseverance of the international community and to the convergence from 2006 towards the line taken by the E3 and to the robust dialogue with Iran. The Security Council not only endorsed the Vienna Agreement by Resolution 2231, but also validated a method, that of pragmatic and demanding multilateralism, a method that was then carried by its 5 permanent members in unity, steadfastly and exemplarily. We all take the measures of the challenges of the moment. The trajectories of the signatory states have diverged since the US left the agreement, to our great regret and concern. After that, Iran has worryingly taken measures that are contrary to its commitments under the agreement. These have serious proliferation consequences, which is why the E3s activated the JCPOA dispute resolution mechanism in January this year to address this serious problem, but to address it within the framework of the agreement. France, Germany, and the UK have fully implemented their commitments. We remain committed to preserving the agreement and to continuing discussions to bring Iran back to full compliance with its commitments under the JCPOA. This requires constructive engagement by Iran and by all. We have just heard the very worrying confirmation of Iran's violations of the provisions of Resolution 2231 on arms transfers. The Secretary General's conclusions, which we support, are consistent with our assessment. Let me be clear. These destabilizing activities, which we have condemned, are unacceptable and must stop. As the E3 Berlin Ministerial Declaration of 19 June testifies, France, together with Germany and the UK, understands and shares the concerns regarding the implications of the upcoming expiration of the embargo on conventional arms provided in Resolution 2231. We have expressed our readiness to explore constructive options to address our common concerns, including outside this Council. We intend to address this issue in close consultation with all members of this Council, in particular the remaining participants in the JCPOA and other key actors. We will continue to be guided by the following objectives: respect for the authority and the integrity of the UN Security Council and commitment to regional stability and security. We would not, however, support unilateral proposals leading to the return of sanctions. They would only deepen divisions in the Security Council and beyond, and not be likely to improve the situation on the ground of nuclear non-proliferation. As the Foreign Ministers of France, Germany, and the UK stated in Berlin on 19 June, we firmly believe that any unilateral attempt to trigger UN sanctions snapback would have serious adverse consequences in the UN Security Council. We would not support such a decision, which would be incompatible with our current efforts to preserve the JCPOA. All members of this Council share fundamental security interests. They bring us together around shared objectives and responsibilities. That is the raison d'être of this Council and the spirit that drives us all. I therefore want to believe that none of us would risk a backsliding that would exacerbate tensions in the Middle East. The JCPOA, which is the result of compromise, can of course be seen as an instrument that can be improved. But there is as yet no serious alternative to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, and its disappearance would improve neither the regional situation nor the security of our populations. We certainly have differences of approach, but it is together that we must build a comprehensive strategy on all aspects of the Iranian issue, with our eyes open, without naivety, with pragmatism and lucidity. It is this long-term objective that we wish to prioritize while preserving the international order based on law, of which we are the guarantors. I thank you. Je reprends mes fonctions de président du Conseil et je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence Monsieur Mohamed Javad Zarif, ministre iranien des Affaires étrangères. Minister, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. President, I wish to begin my statement with words Prime Minister Mossadegh used in this Council 59 years ago, and I quote, "The Security Council was established so that large and small nations alike might sit around the same table and cooperate for the maintenance of peace in accordance with the purposes and principles of the United Nations. The Council cannot perform its great task unless big powers respect the principles which it was created to embody." End of quote. Unfortunately, 2 years later, he was overthrown in a CIA coup. Mr. President, if this Council falters again, it will be a generational setback for the cause of multilateralism and the rule of law. We have all in past years seen how malign U.S. unilateralism has intensely assaulted international cooperation and international institutions. Its parallel endeavor to supplant international law with U.S. domestic laws has directly undermined global peace and security. Regrettably, complacency has enabled and encouraged this recklessness. Indeed, complacency is a root cause for why we are gathered here today. Iran and other members of the international community have since 8 May 2018 been witnessing the US government, a co-sponsor of Security Council Resolution 2231, persistently flouting the resolution while also trying to force other states to join it in violating the very text it put forward itself. More dangerously, and for the first time in UN history, a permanent member of the Security Council is punishing law-abiding states and private citizens for not violating a Council resolution. We should all remember that Resolution 2231 emphasized, and I quote, promoting and facilitating the development of normal economic and trade contacts and cooperation with Iran, end of quote. And yet, not a single Council session has been convened to reprove the US government, or at least investigate its repeated violations. Instead, some European members of the Council are contemplating, as we heard today, further undermining the resolution and the Council, while further reneging on their own JCPOA commitments. To cover this up, the United States has, with some of its enablers, pressured the Secretariat to adopt a perverse reading of Resolution 2231, which is the polar opposite of the clear affirmation by the Security Council, and I quote, that conclusion of the JCPOA marks a fundamental shift in consideration of this issue, end of quote. This one-sided interpretation by the Secretariat has been repeatedly rejected by 3 JCPOA participants, China, Russia, and Iran. And let me take this opportunity now to thank Russia and China and other members of the Security Council who have expressed their concern over this. Moreover, the United States, along with its accomplices in the war crimes in Yemen, have gone further in their now infamous campaign of intimidation against international institutions. Most recently, they coerced the Secretariat to rely on self-serving allegations and forged documents to produce an utterly unprofessional report outside the scope of Secretariat mandate under UNSCR 2231. Not surprisingly, the Secretariat simultaneously tried to absolve the Saudi coalition of its well-documented child killing in Yemen. This status quo is neither acceptable nor sustainable. The international community in general and the United Nations Security Council in particular are facing an important decision. Do we maintain respect for the rule of law, or do we return to the law of the jungle by surrendering to the whims of an outlaw bully? Mr. President, in spite of our strong and legitimate objections to the historic mistreatment of Iran by the Security Council, particularly throughout 8 years of aggression, including the use of chemical weapons by Saddam Hussein, as well as in the course of the unnecessary nuclear crisis, Iran showed its good faith by engaging in negotiations to reach a diplomatic solution as called for by all Security Council resolutions on the nuclear issue. After 13 years of complex negotiations, in 2015, Iran and the 5 permanent members of the Security Council plus Germany signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which is annexed to and inseparable from Resolution 2231. Iran clearly stated its positions immediately after the adoption of the resolution, and again more recently. Yet, it fulfilled all its commitments in good faith, verified by numerous IAEA reports. In spite of this great historic achievement of multilateral diplomacy, the President of the United States in May 2018 announced his country's unilateral withdrawal from the JCPOA and the unlawful reimposition of all US sanctions in material breach of Resolution 2231. Prior to that, the United States had persistently committed multiple cases of significant non-performance of its JCPOA obligations. It is important to note that even the previous US administration made every effort to minimize the positive impact of its sanction-lifting obligations under the JCPOA and Resolution 2231. This has all been documented in my numerous letters to the JCPOA Joint Commission Coordinator and the UN Secretary General, all of which have been ignored, unfortunately, by the European JCPOA participants. Following the US withdrawal from the JCPOA, the UN Secretary General, the remaining JCPOA participants, and many other members of the international community asked Iran to address its concerns through the mechanisms established in the JCPOA and to allow the remaining JCPOA participants to redress the unlawful withdrawal. The leaders of European JCPOA participants requested Iran to wait for only a few weeks to allow them to compensate for the losses Iran incurred as a result of reimposed US sanctions. While expressly reserving Iran's immediate right under paragraph 26 of JCPOA, I initiated the dispute resolution mechanism under its paragraph 36 on 10 May 2018. However, acting in good faith, we refrained from applying the remedy prescribed in the JCPOA in order to enable the remaining JCPOA participants to make good on their promises. For a full year, we continued full implementation of the JCPOA. I trust that you are aware of the 15 consecutive IAEA reports which verified Iran's full compliance with its JCPOA commitments, including many that were issued after US withdrawal. Unfortunately, the E3 response to our strategic patience was not a long overdue assertion of European strategic autonomy. Rather, it was overcompliance with the US maximum pressure, targeting all Iranians. On 6 November 2018, I wrote to the coordinator of the JCPOA and the remaining JCPOA participants under paragraph 36, that is the dispute resolution mechanism of the JCPOA, and I quote from the letter: "The United States has now reimposed with full effect all sanctions specified in the JCPOA and its Annex II, and no remedial measure has been implemented by the remaining JCPOA participants. Most have effectively joined the restrictive measures against Iran. Either they should ensure Iran's legitimate benefits by fulfilling their commitments made in their statements of 6 July and 24 September 2018 in real and practical terms without further delay, or Iran will have no option but to restore a semblance of balance as the remedy that the participants contemplated in the dispute mechanism did not resolve the issue. In view of the above, I formally call on for the convening of another ministerial meeting of the Joint Commission." End of quote from that letter. No meeting was convened, and none of the European JCPOA participants even bothered to write a rebuttal for another 6 months. Having repeatedly exhausted the dispute resolution mechanism to absolutely no avail, my government was left with no recourse but to exercise its rights under paragraph 26 and 36 of the JCPOA to apply remedial action prescribed in JCPOA and cease performing its commitments in part, as prescribed in JCPOA on 8 May 2019, a full year after US withdrawal and reimposition of sanctions. In spite of all this, our remedial measures have until now had no impact on the IAEA's monitoring and verification of our peaceful nuclear program, thereby making any claimed proliferation risk irrelevant. Indeed, Iran's peaceful nuclear program remains subject to the most robust inspection regime in history. From 2016 through 2019, over 92% of the agency's total comparable global inspections were carried out in Iran. Even the recent controversial report by the Director General of the IAEA on 5 June 2020 states that, and I quote, "The agency continues to verify the non-diversion of declared nuclear material at the nuclear facilities and locations outside facilities where nuclear material is customarily used, declared by Iran under its safeguards agreement." End of quote. Having said that, the agency must resist external pressures to manipulate its agenda. The litany of forged documents at its doorstep have a stated objective of forever killing the JCPOA, thereby ending the agency's robust monitoring of current activities in Iran. Resuscitating 17-year-old allegations with no proliferation risk, which were investigated and permanently closed by the IAEA Board of Governors in 2015, will certainly not serve the agency, nor will they serve the cause of non-proliferation. Mr. President, to avoid taking too much of your time, the details and references for these and all other assertions in my statement are provided in 35 footnotes. Our mission has submitted this statement with its footnotes for circulation as a document of the Security Council. Mr. President, matters which are extraneous to the JCPOA by mutual agreement, such as Iran's defensive capabilities and regional policies, are being maliciously raised by the US administration, parroted by a handful of its allies and clients. Here it must be underlined that the bargain made in the JCPOA was in total cognizance of our disagreement with the Western members of the P5+1 over certain issues. Do not be deceived. We mutually agreed not to address these issues. Most importantly, because the United States was not prepared to or even capable of addressing our grave concerns over its unfathomable level of arms sales and buildup in our neighborhood, as well as its malign behavior and constant interventions, which have left our region in ruins. The United States has carried out, and I have spelled them out in the footnote, numerous acts of armed aggression against Iran and its neighbors, invaded our neighbors 3 times in the last 3 decades, milked the region of its resources through destabilizing arms sales, systematically supported terrorists, and provided material support for crimes against humanity in Yemen. The people of our region had enough of the malign US presence and demand its termination. The bitter irony here is that most Americans also want their troops returned home where they belong. This very regime absurdly accuses Iran of meddling in its own region. Yes, of course. We want to partner with all our neighbors to create a strong region that precludes the emergence of hegemonic aspirations by any power, regional or global. A strong region that requires homegrown political and territorial stability, and a strong region for which all neighbors need to exercise strategic self-restraint, just like Iran. It was to this end that the President of the Islamic Republic of Iran put forward the Hormuz peace endeavor, or hope. And we can do it without US meddling some 6,000 miles away from its shores. Mr. President, the International Court of Justice clearly underlined in its 1971 advisory opinion on Namibia, and I quote, "One of the fundamental principles governing international relationship thus established is that a party which disowns or does not fulfill its own obligations cannot be recognized as retaining the right which it claims to derive from the relationship." End of quote. After officially and explicitly ceasing its participation in the JCPOA at the highest level, and having violated each and every one of its obligations under the JCPOA and Resolution 2231, the United States cannot arrogate to itself any right under that resolution, nor can its enablers try to save its face via so-called middle ground formulas. The timetable for the removal of arms restrictions embodied in Resolution 2231 is an inseparable part of the hard-won compromise enabling the JCPOA participants to finally agree on the overall package of the JCPOA and Resolution 2231. The resolution explicitly urges, and I quote, its full implementation on the timetable, end of quote. Any attempt to change or amend the agreed timetable is thus tantamount to undermining Resolution 2231 in its entirety. The Council must not allow a single state to abuse the process. As specified in the letter of the President of the Islamic Republic of Iran addressed to the leaders of the remaining JCPOA participants on 8 May 2019, any new restriction by the Council is against the fundamental commitments made to the Iranian people. In such a scenario, Iran's options, as already notified to the remaining JCPOA participants, will be fair, and the United States and any entity which may assist it or acquiesce in its illegal behavior will bear full responsibility. Mr. President, the unlawful U.S. unilateral withdrawal from the JCPOA and the reimposition of its sanctions entail U.S. responsibility under UNSCR 2231, UN Charter, and applicable international law. The United States has also disregarded the decision of the International Court of Justice. It is long overdue for the international community, and in particular this Council, to hold the United States government accountable for the consequences of its wrongful acts, including its malicious endeavors to wage economic terrorism on the entire Iranian nation, willfully deprive them of food and medicine. And every of these statements have been corroborated by quotes in the footnotes, and irreparably harm their economy and their standard of living. The United States must fully compensate the Iranian people for all damages it has inflicted upon them, appallingly, for no reason other than to satisfy domestic constituencies and personal aggrandizement. While the Islamic Republic of Iran has shown in words and deeds our desire and our preference for constructive engagement, we do not depend on others for our security, stability, or prosperity. We've learned to solely depend on ourselves. That is why more than 40 years of U.S. pressure, whether through demonization or war, sanction or terror, including the cowardly assassination of our region's counterterrorism hero, General Qasem Soleimani, has failed to bring Iranians to their knees or affect our people's decision-making calculus. For my final words, let me again borrow from Prime Minister Mossadegh's speech before the Security Council in 1951. And I quote, "The Council will not have failed to note the cogency of our arguments to the law. Yet this is not a legal body, but primarily a political body charged with the highest political responsibility. It will readily understand, therefore, that we will not be coerced, whether by foreign governments or by international authorities." I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie Son Excellence Monsieur Zarif de sa déclaration. Avant de mettre un terme à cette séance, qui est la dernière prévue pour le mois de juin, je souhaite adresser les sincères remerciements de la délégation française aux membres du Conseil ainsi qu'au secrétariat du Conseil pour l'appui qu'ils nous ont fourni. Au terme d'un mois chargé, nous pouvons nous féliciter d'avoir su dégager un consensus autour de plusieurs questions importantes dont nous étions saisis. Nous n'aurions pu y parvenir seuls et l'ardeur à la tâche, l'appui et le concours de chaque délégation et des représentants du secrétariat ainsi que des équipes chargées de l'appui technique y sont pour beaucoup. Alors que notre présidence se termine, je sais que tous les membres du Conseil s'associent à moi pour souhaiter bonne chance à la délégation de l'Allemagne qui prend la présidence pour le mois de juillet. La séance est levée.